My name is Rachel Best. I work with the Wisconsin Economic Development in the meetings department or meetings team. And as I've mentioned, we are about to kick off our webinar on export resources and how the state of Wisconsin and Wisconsin Economic Development can help support your growth, particularly with exports. Before we get started, I'm just going to talk about a few housekeeping notes. One is I want to notify that we are recording this. And so if you have any objections to that, you probably saw that note as you joined us. But if you have any objections, now is the time to exit. Also, if you probably goes without saying after many years of doing Zoom meetings, but if you are not actively talking, we would just ask that you could mute yourself. You can do that on the taskbar at the bottom, or you can mute yourself usually with a little microphone icon with a hash through it on your own headset. Then one other thing, if you hover, see where your name is, usually in the lower left-hand corner of where your video screen is. If you hover over that, right-click, you can rename yourself. We would love for you to rename yourself to include your name as well as which company you're with. Just provides a little more context about who we're talking with for us and helps enable conversation to be more fruitful. And we welcome you to be on video as well as you are comfortable. And the last point I want to make is that we will be holding questions to the end. There'll be plenty of time to ask questions. And I can say from experience that Katie is really an expert in ways to grow exports and the programs that we have available here. So she will be happy to help both in this webinar and afterwards. But if you could hold your questions to the end, that would be stupendous. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Export Resources webinar. Today, we're going to talk about how WEDC and specifically the International Market Access Grant can help you grow your export sales. My name is Katie Udak. I am a grant specialist for the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. So I manage all aspects of the International Market Access Grant program. I'll be your point of contact for every part of that grants process. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how you can get involved and take advantage of this great resource. So we'll start with just a little bit about who we are here at WEDC, and then we'll dive into what our grant program does and how it can help you. WEDC is the state's lead economic development agency. We support businesses in entrepreneurship and innovation, business and community development, and global trade and investment. Our mission is to strategically deploy financial resources and technical assistance to invest in Wisconsin and enhance its assets and opportunities, and to address underinvestment and distress. Our vision is an economy where all Wisconsinites have the opportunity to thrive. So we achieve that mission and that vision in a lot of different ways through many, many different active programs. Today, we're going to focus on the Global Trade and Investment Division and the financial resources that we offer to help businesses grow internationally. So our international mission is to enhance Wisconsin's global competitiveness by accelerating exports and promoting Wisconsin as a foreign direct investment destination. We'll focus on just the accelerating exports aspect today. If you work with us in any program or any process that we offer, you'll get to know our trade team really well. Each of them is specialized in a different region of the world. They oversee our trade reps, they lead our global trade ventures, and they'll help review grant applications that fall into their region. They are our best points of contact, our experts for any questions about doing business in a specific country. So if you apply for this grant, you'll get to meet at least one of them and probably all through working with us here at WEDC. I can always come back to this slide later if you have specific questions about a specific country, but if you see anything right now that you want to jot down, go ahead and do that. All right, like I said, I can always go back to that later. So why export, right? If you're here today, you're definitely interested in exporting, and most companies that grow know that they need to export. But navigating the global marketplace takes specialized knowledge. It takes a sound strategy that's based on proven best practices, right? It's not something that happens overnight. And especially over the last 3 years, Wisconsin companies have really had to change the way that they think about their businesses. So WEDC is here to help you. We can help you gain the insights that you need to get into those international markets. The International Market Access Grant helps companies lay the foundation for a new export strategy or jumpstart existing export goals. With 96% of the world's consumers outside the US and a billion people, full billion people expected to join the global middle class in the next decade, Wisconsin companies are really changing the way that they think about business and they think about who their customers are. For companies that want to grow, exporting is not just a luxury, it is really a necessity in this globalized world. So in addition to reaching new markets that are interested in your product and protecting yourself against single market volatility, exporting is proven to help companies grow faster, to offer higher wages, to improve their labor pool, and ultimately to increase their valuation overall. All of you are probably here because you have some interest in exporting and you want to grow, but navigating the global marketplace is, like I said, challenging. We're here to help you do that. We can help you with not only our International Market Access Grant, which we'll focus on today, but there are a number of other technical assistance programs that we offer as well that you can learn about when you work with our trade team. So let's get into our International Market Access Grant. You'll hear us call it the IMAG a lot for short. Through the IMAG, Wisconsin companies can be reimbursed for specific short-term expenses associated with a targeted export project that will help grow their presence in their identified international markets. So either a single country or a small subset of countries where you can show a cohesive strategy. The program has two tiers of support. There is a base tier of support for successful applicants. That is a $10,000 grant with a limit of 3 grants in the lifetime of the company. And for manufacturers that have completed the Export-Tech Strategy Development Program, we offer a higher tier of support up to $25,000 per grant with a limit of 6 grants in the lifetime of the company. To be eligible to participate in this program, companies need to be established businesses operating in Wisconsin and registered in Wisconsin for at least 1 year. And you need to manufacture, process, assemble, or distribute a product or perform a service with the potential to be exported. So doing something that is exportable, that can be sold overseas. That can be products, that can be services, as long as it's something that you could successfully sell in a foreign country without moving your entire business to that foreign country. Companies need to have substantial export-related operations in Wisconsin. So some kind of a facility here that's doing something export-related, but companies don't have to be headquartered in Wisconsin. They can have other locations as long as the Wisconsin location is substantial. Companies have to have gross revenue not greater than $100 million for the most recent complete fiscal year. And 35% of the value of your exportable product or service has to be composed of Wisconsin cost inputs. If you're not sure if you meet the cost inputs requirement, we have a spreadsheet that can help you figure that out. The grant is available to companies that are new to exporting or companies that have some export experience. What we're looking to see in an application is that the project itself is new. So even if you've been exporting before, this could be a gear shift or a new market for you, or you could be completely new to exporting. This is also a competitive grant, so we award funds on the strength of an application, and we do not fund all applications. So some applications won't be funded, but we will look at the merits of your individual application and not necessarily comparing it against other applications that we receive. Let's talk about what you can do with the money. Like I said, this grant supports a short-term export development project, and we break down our allowable expenses into 4 main categories: trade shows, marketing and promotion, consulting services, and export education. These are some examples of the main expenses that we commonly fund under those categories. Trade shows are the type of expense that we fund most frequently. They tend to be very cost prohibitive, especially if you're going to have a booth where you're exhibiting, showing off your product. So we can assist with the costs of registration for the show, with booth construction and booth space expenses, one-time shipping if you need to get marketing material or a demo unit over to that show. And we can also assist with other at show assistances like interpreters to help you staff your booth in a foreign country. This category also includes non-WEDC trade missions. So it does not cover WEDC's global trade ventures, but travel to foreign countries with other organizations, either private groups or other state agencies, federal agencies. Those non-WEDC trips can potentially be covered under this grant. We have a trade mission coming up to India with the Council of Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Governors. That is something that could potentially be covered by this grant, as an example. Marketing and promotion, also a category that we very frequently support. And this is a really broad and really flexible category. It can include your traditional types of marketing, advertising expenses, flyers, other things that you're going to print out and bring to that show. But it can also include website development, build out for foreign languages or for e-commerce, for hosting in a foreign country. It can include redesign or translation of your marketing materials, making sure that they're available in the languages that your overseas customers speak. This category includes IP registration, so patent, trademark, or copyright in a foreign country. And it could include product certifications, things like CE marks, UL listings, different specialty food or organic food certifications, any of those specific marks or certificates that you need to be able to get the product into another country. This grant also covers consulting services. So that can include things that we talked about before, like interpreters, website designers, translators. It can also include trade reps or export development consultants, whether those are from private companies, from federal agencies, and it does also include WEDC's global network of authorized trade reps. That is the only WEDC service that is covered by this grant program, or our trade reps. And lastly, this grant can cover export education, whether you are going to an event or to a seminar, or if you want to bring a speaker or a trainer into your company, as long as the education is for your employees, it's directly related to exporting, and it's beyond the scope of your typical employee onboarding. So something more specialized like cultural competency training, export compliance or export best practices, or even foreign language training. There's a lot of room to use this category to huge advantage. And I will touch briefly on transportation and lodging. This is a little different from a lot of other grant programs for export development. We do not cover transportation and lodging on this grant. We do allow transportation and lodging for full-time employees to be used toward matching funds, but they aren't reimbursable. And we'll talk a little bit more about matching funds when we get to the budget. I also want to give a quick list of the most commonly asked ineligible expenses. This isn't a comprehensive list, but it's the things that come up most often. So anything that's a regular cost of running your business, capital expenditures like rent or salaries, your day-to-day business costs like your software, your subscriptions, your taxes, your office supplies. This program also does not cover anything that's not export related. So anything that's unique to the US, like a US patent or a trade show that has no international attendance. I already talked a little bit about WEDC programs. So the grant does not cover WEDC-led trade ventures or the Export Tech program or anything that's not a business expense. Food, clothing, visas, medical expenses. We'll also talk a little more about how we define your project in a minute, but anything that's outside the scope of your project. So the grant would not cover anything that you didn't tell us about in your application or that wasn't listed in your grant contract. Like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just our most commonly asked questions. And if you have specific expenses and you're not sure where they fall, eligible or not, I'm always happy to sit down with people and walk them through their ideas, their thoughts, and see what we could or couldn't cover under this grant program. So let's talk about how you can get this grant. How do you apply? The application is available in Network Wisconsin, which is our online application portal. For those of you that haven't worked with us in the last year or two, this is a pretty new portal and we're really excited about it. It makes the application process much easier. So you can now do it entirely online. It generally takes us about 6 weeks to make a preliminary decision. So we recommend applying no less than 6 weeks before you need to spend any grant money, especially if you have things that are time sensitive, like a deadline to sign up for a trade show. You want to get that application in at least 6 weeks before you need to hit that deadline, since we won't be able to cover any expenses retroactively. We won't be able to cover anything that happened before the application was accepted. So the application is open right now. We are taking applications right now. We will take applications until October 31st. So if you've got things coming up this fall, they can potentially be covered under the 2024 grant cycle. And projects must end no later than December 31st of 2024. So most companies will have a year to 15 months to work on this project. We talked about the budget limits a little bit earlier, a $10,000 request limit for eligible applicants, and for graduates of Export Tech, a $25,000 budget. There is a 30% cost match required on this grant. So what that means is you will need to spend an additional 30% of the grant amount out of your own budget that WEDC won't reimburse. So if you're awarded a $10,000 grant, in order to claim the $10,000 in funds, you'll need to spend an additional $3,000. So a total project budget of $13,000, and then $10,000 would be reimbursed. Some key dates to keep in mind in this application cycle. The application cycle is currently open as of July 1, and we will take applications until October 31st. October 31st is the absolute last date we will take an application. We will review your application whenever we receive it. So if you want to get started on a project earlier, you can submit the application earlier. I always recommend trying to submit applications earlier. Not only does it give you more time, but then you avoid that crunch at the end of October when the amount of funding gets low and things can get more competitive. If there is still a lot of funding available after October 31st, we may open a second round from February 1st to March 15th. So that would be a much shorter second round. Don't count on the second round as a guaranteed chance to submit your application later, because we'll only open it if necessary. Plan on submitting your application by October 31st. Once you've submitted an application, you've gotten accepted, you've gone through the contracting process, and you're starting to spend that grant money, you'll want to be keeping track of all of the grant expenses that you want us to cover. This is a reimbursement grant, so you will pay for projects initially out of your own budget. Once you have paid an expense and you've completed the activity, like you've gone to the trade show or you've finished translating your website, then you can submit a reimbursement request to us. A reimbursement request must be in the form of invoices that are dated, itemized, showing us the vendor name, your company name as the purchaser, a clear description of your product or service, as well as the price and the date of purchase. And those invoices do have to be on vendor letterhead. So we're not able to take credit card slips, bank records, or email confirmations. We have a whole reimbursement guide that we'll provide to assist you, but keeping track of this documentation as you go is a very critical part of the grant process, because without the documentation, we won't be able to reimburse the funds. Projects have to start after the application is accepted, so that'll be your contractual project start date. Everything must be invoiced and begun on or after that project start date, and then all of your activities and your payments need to be wrapped up by your project end date. For most companies, that'll be December 31st of 2024. We do give you some time after December 31st to compile your documentation and send it to us, but you can't be working on the project or making payments during that time. It's just a chance to get your documentation together. You can submit documents to us throughout the project if you like. Most companies will submit 2 to 3 batches of invoices throughout the course of the project. So we do recommend grouping them together, a few invoices in a batch rather than each individually. It makes the match calculation a lot easier, but you can submit an initial reimbursement request when you're halfway done and another one at the end if you prefer. So for those of you who want to get started on an application, I want to give you a few tips for writing a very strong application that's likely to get funded. First and foremost, demonstrate need and thoroughly justify the expenditure as an opportunity for growth. A strong application that shows more need for funds and more potential to result in growth for your company is more likely to be funded. So this is designed to support a short-term booster project. We want to see how this is going to kickstart those exports and really get you going in a way that wouldn't be possible without the grant funds. We also want you to identify your markets. Be specific about a country or a small subset of countries. You're going to need to show a cohesive strategy for the specific countries that you identify, so keep that scope narrow. The grant supports a targeted subset of your company's export strategy, not your entire international activity for the year. We want to see what you can show us strategically and concisely. We also want to see that your targeted export strategy is based on some kind of evidence or some kind of research. We want to know how you picked this country or these countries and how you picked these activities and why they're going to be beneficial to you. Be as specific as you can, both about your markets and your uses of funding. We want to know exactly where all of the money is going and why. And lastly, read carefully. Be sure you're answering the question completely and thoughtfully. Proofread everything before you submit it and make sure that the application is complete. Those are the best ways to make sure that that application is all done, ready to go by the time that it gets to us, and that it's most likely to be funded. So I will take some time for some questions. I know there were a few in the chat, so I'll start with those. But for those of you who are feeling good about this and ready to get started, you can send me an email right now and I will get you set up in Network Wisconsin. You can start your application today. You still have plenty of time before October 31st to get that going. And I'm also happy to set up individual meetings with anybody who has more detailed questions about your specific project. So please feel free to take down my information, call or email with any questions, or to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go through a couple of questions that I saw in the chat first.
I can help with that, Katie, if you want. I've got them logged. Yeah. So the first question we had was, does this include SaaS or software as a service products if they're marketed internationally or only physical products?
We have awarded grants to companies with software as a service in the past. So those can be included. It is absolutely exportable. It doesn't have to be a physical product. We're just looking to see that same, targeted strategy, show us why that software is going to be saleable in your specific market, the same as we would with a physical product.
Thank you. Next question that we had, and feel free to come off mic, anybody that asks these questions, if you have elaborations or additional follow-up questions. Chances are, if you have this question, others might as well. The next question is, sort of around the software. If you need to do localization, let's say on your web page or website coding, as far as language or coding around the software, for example, would the grant be able to cover those costs?
That's a great question. And this is something that we've actually changed recently to try to provide more assistance to software companies. There are some globalization costs for software that we can cover, primarily things like research that's necessary to understand regulations that apply to your software in a foreign country, particular certifications that you might need. Some countries require certifications, security certifications for software, or translating the copy of your software so that people who speak other languages can actually read and interact with it. Those services or those costs do need to be incurred by a consultant because the grant is not able to cover staff time. So for your engineers to go in and do the coding, their time is not something we would be able to cover. But if you hired, for example, someone who speaks French to come in and translate the copy into French, that on a consulting basis, that would be coverable.
Thank you. Next question is more about eligibility. If you have more than one business under the same LLC, can both businesses be included in one application, or do they need to be separate applications? And then I have a follow-up for you after that.
Sure. So One LLC, one application is the short answer to that question. Each legal entity can only apply once per fiscal year and once at a time. If you're operating multiple businesses under the same legal entity, we would generally expect only one of those to be applying unless they are so closely related that they're performing the same service. This is a little bit more of a unique situation, so I'd be happy to sit down with you and talk more through how your business is actually structured. But the general rule is one legal entity, one application.
And then is somebody that has multiple businesses under multiple LLCs or other type of business entities able to apply more than once?
If you are the owner of multiple legal entities, we have had situations in the past where one person who owns multiple legal entities has submitted an application for each legal entity. It's definitely something that we scrutinize to make sure that those projects are going to be kept completely separate. So if you're able to show us that those two projects are going to be totally separate from each other, they're not going to overlap, the grant funds aren't going to cross between companies, that's something we can work with you on.
And just to confirm, a legal entity includes a sole proprietorship, correct?
It does, that's correct. If you're a sole proprietor, you as your sole proprietorship can only submit one application.
Thank you. Another question regarding sort of the matching fees and the example that you cited. If the total cost is $13,000, would the applicant portion that they need to match be either $3,900 or $3,000?
Okay, so if the total cost of the entire project is $13,000, I'm assuming you're applying for a $10,000 grant to cover that. So if you are awarded a $10,000 grant, you'll pay a total of $13,000. We will reimburse 10 and you will cover 3. If you are applying for $13,000 in grant funds, then you would need to pay an additional $3,900 out of your own budget that we would not reimburse. So if you're getting $13,000 reimbursed, you actually need to spend $16,900. So the 30% is based on the grant amount, not the total spend. And if you have questions about working out this math for your specific project, we have a spreadsheet that does the math for you. And I'm also happy to sit down and work through it further for specific dollar amounts that are, not 10,000 or 25,000.
Thanks. And I wanted to say and reiterate that Katie is extremely helpful and friendly and accessible. And so if you reach out to her, and I'll pop I did put her email address above in the chat, but I'll pop it in again. She will get back to you and she will help coach on some of these items. If somebody is doing export tech training from August to November 2023, will they miss the time frame for the 2024 funds?
Great question. If you are doing export tech this fall and you're going to be one of our November 2023 graduates, you could apply for the 2024 grant at the $10,000 level. You need to graduate from export tech before you can apply for the $25,000. So the $25,000 doesn't kick in until you actually finish the program, even if you're currently enrolled or currently signed up. So you could still apply for 2024. It would just be at the $10,000 level. And then if we were to either open a second round in February or March, if you hadn't already applied, you could then apply at $25,000 in the second round, or you could wait for July 2024 when the 2025 application opens at $25,000. So the higher dollar value for export tech kicks in when you graduate from and complete the export tech program.
Thank you. All right. I think this will be an easier one, but our market research cost paid as long as they're to foreign consultants and also exporting services.
Sure. So you have your choice of consultants under this program. As long as the category that they fit into is eligible, the service that they're providing to you is an eligible service. So market research, definitely something we frequently cover. You can choose whatever consultant you like, whether it's our trade rep, a different state or federal agency, a private company in Wisconsin, in the US, wherever in the world you like. You can select the company that you want to use as your vendor.
And on the bent of other eligible fees, what about legal fees?
Legal fees can be covered as long as they're specifically related to something short-term and export related. So generally, the only legal fees we've covered are legal fees for either intellectual property or specific certifications. So if you have an attorney helping you get a patent or trademark or copyright in a foreign country, if they're providing sort of a general day-to-day legal service to you that's not export specific or not short term, that would be considered a cost of running your business and would not be covered.
Can I have a follow-up to that answer?
Sure.
I didn't want to be too wordy in the chat. I'm specifically curious about legal fees related to developing business relationships with Canadian distributors.
Potentially. I think that's something we could probably sit down and talk a little more detail about.
Sure, that's
fine. It depends on the scope of the service. So
okay.
If they're providing sort of like a matchmaking service for you, that is something that we've covered in the past.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
Another expense question. What about, would it be eligible to host a training session in a foreign country?
The training needs to be provided to your employees in order to be covered on this grant. We're not able to cover costs for training customers or training third parties. So if you need to send your employees to a foreign country to get some specific export related training, that is potentially eligible. If you are the one who is educating or providing training to a third party, that would not be covered under this grant.
All right. If you had a product line that's private labeled and you want to sell it to another country, it's manufactured, let's say in Illinois, but sold out of Wisconsin, are expenses related to getting this product line exported to Canada eligible for grant funds?
So as long as you meet the eligibility criteria for the grant, right, you have to have some kind of an export related operation in Wisconsin. We have had companies that have offices or facilities in other states, but you'd still need to meet the general eligibility criteria of having a Wisconsin facility of some kind and meeting the 35% Wisconsin cost inputs requirement. Assuming that you meet both of those criteria, we can explore specific expenses related to exporting to Canada. That is, of course, one of Wisconsin's top export markets, and there's a lot of potential expenses we could assist you with there.
Yeah, and again, it's nice to have a conversation with Katie sometimes, because just because one expense may not be eligible in her sort of organically through discussion with her, you might find something else that would be eligible, and then offset that cost to then pay for the other one that is ineligible. Next question. We assume it's okay to apply for less than $10,000, right?
Yes, absolutely. If your project is going to cost less than $10,000, or you don't think you can spend, the full $13,000, you can apply for less. I do want to note, however, that the 3 grant lifetime limit applies no matter how much funding you are awarded or how much funding you use on a grant. So even if you apply for less than $10,000, that still counts as one of your 3 lifetime uses. So if you think you have the capacity to add in a couple more things to get that $10,000, you think you could handle that workload, that's something we can explore too, to make sure that you're able to take advantage of your 3 fund utilization.
Sarah, did you have a follow-up to that?
Nope, that's perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Sorry, I just saw your hand was raised. Perfect. So then what about a micro business, like with 1 employee? Are they allowed to apply for this?
Yeah, there's no minimum employee count, but one of the questions that we do ask on the application is, how is your company going to grow from this project? So one of the reasons that we have previously denied single person businesses is because they told us they didn't want to grow. So as long as you can show us that this is going to be beneficial to your company and help you grow within Wisconsin, that we would be happy to take an application from you and review it.
I think that's a good point, Katie. I mean, we are part of the state's support, and we want to see growth in Wisconsin. I'm sure you guys as business owners want to grow as well, but if that's not part of your strategy, then it may not be the right program for you. Next question is, if invoices are in a foreign currency, how will they be reimbursed? At the current rate for that day or at the time that it was actually paid? I deal with this all the time when I pay my overseas bills as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. For invoices that are in foreign currencies, we are required to use the OANDA rate for the day that you made the payment. So you can go to oanda.com and see what the rate is on the day that you make the payment. If the amount that you pay is different from how we calculate the payment using the OANDA rate, we have to pay the lower of the two. Usually the OANDA rate is going to be lower than whatever you were charged, but if for some reason you got a really great deal, you got a great rate that day, and your dollar value is lower, we would pay what you actually paid.
All right, and then we had a reference and question about the graduation from a program that you were referencing. Can you tell us more about which program you were talking about? I think it was Export Tech, but that you were talking about.
Export Tech, absolutely. Export Tech is an export strategy development program that we deliver in partnership with the Wisconsin Manufacturing Extension Partnership out of Milwaukee. It is an export education course for manufacturers. So you do have to be a manufacturer in order to participate. It's a 3-month intensive program where you go to 3 educational sessions to help you identify the best countries where your product is going to be successful, and then create a strategy that is specific to those countries. You have access to our trade rep services, to our staff as experts, and to a non-competitive cohort of other manufacturers. And because companies graduate from this program with a concrete export strategy specific to the countries that they've identified, which is exactly what we're looking for in this application, we then offer a higher tier of funding support under this grant. So if Export Tech is something that you're interested in, you can give me a call, send me an email. I'm happy to get you more info about the program. And I can also connect you with Roxanne Bauman, who's one of our partners in Milwaukee, who teaches the course.
And can service-based companies join Export Tech as well, or only people like manufacturing?
You do have to have a manufacturing NAICS code in order to participate in Export Tech. It is federally subsidized, and that's one of the requirements of those specific funds. So only manufacturers are eligible to participate in Export Tech.
And then Mamadou has a question of, when we budget for our business, should we base it on 10,000 or 13,000?
If you're applying for a $10,000 grant, you will need to spend $13,000. So plan on a $13,000 spend, and then 10,000 of that would be reimbursed, assuming that the documentation is correct. But yes, plan for a $13,000 spend to cover the grant and the match.
I believe I got all the questions, but I would like to open it up to the group to either come off mic, or if you're not comfortable with audio, you can go ahead and pop another question in the chat. But feel free to come off mic if you want, off mute. All right. Katie, what will you be doing for follow-up? Will they get this recording or presentation from you?
Yeah, so we will upload this recording to our website. If you would like to get the link to that, you can send me an email, give me a call. I think we have everyone's email. So it sounds like a lot of people are interested in the recording. We can go ahead and send that link out to everybody who signed up for the webinar, so that you have this available. And as I said earlier, if you've got specific questions, you want to talk through anything in more detail, please feel free to set up some time with me. Or if you want to go ahead and get started on the application, I can get you a Network Wisconsin login today.
Yes, so I think one of the takeaways for me is that, hey, if you're ready to go, you want to put in the application, don't even maybe need clarification from Katie, you still need to contact her to get the application portal basically opened and set up for you. So pretty much no matter what, the next step is contacting Katie and can help get access and eligibility to these funds. Thank you, Sarah, for your feedback. Yeah, we try to be helpful, and you know, there's a lot of good reasons to export and grow your business that way, and try to be flexible and creative within the boundaries of any sort of governmental program. But we do try to be flexible and I guess not too governmental is how I usually explain it. Maybe I shouldn't be based in marketing if that's how I sell it. But if there's not any other questions, or if you're more comfortable asking your questions offline, I just popped Katie's email again into the chat, and you can follow up, and then we will be sending that email to the group that has the recording and a reminder about the actual link to the IMAG page, and you can always respond to that. I will make sure that the email address is corrected in that automated email. All right, Katie, any last thoughts or remarks?
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. You've got my info. Please don't be a stranger. I'm happy to help you out, and I look forward to seeing your application.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.